Gonzalo Lira. We've received that he has died in Ukraine in prison, which is so tragic. When you look at his journey, when you look at what he has done during this war in Ukraine, how did you find him?
Oh, I started watching Gonzalo about 2 or 3 months into the war, back in say May, early June of 2022. And then it turned out Gonzalo was reading my material. And so he invited me on his podcast. So I appeared several times with him, both alone and with some other people. So, Gonzalo and I developed a friendship much in the same way you and I have. We haven't met in person, but there's still that interaction and exchange that you have both while you're being recorded and then when you're not recording, when you're talking offline. When Gonzalo got out of prison and tried to make a break for it, he called me. But the problem was I had my phone off. It was late. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning and my phone was off. And then when I realized that he was trying to get in touch with me, I tried to get back and connect. And that was the day he posted those videos and then was reapprehended. In retrospect, I wish he would have tried to go to the U.S. Embassy to seek shelter. They're obligated to take him in by virtue of having a U.S. passport. But he's been murdered. It's that simple. This was a war crime. There was no justification, reason to hold him or imprison him. It is dangerous to offer opinions in a totalitarian state. That's what, we're beginning to fear here in the United States, that the crackdowns that come from that. But you could always, count on Gonzalo for something fresh and interesting to say. And he was very much of I call him an open mind in terms of wanting to engage people and in ideas. He had some of his own quirks and idiosyncrasies, as do all human beings. And, I think there are some who have been critical of him that really, even though he is dead, owe his family an apology for things they've said and written about Gonzalo. Because I think Gonzalo was a good man, well-meaning, and he played an important role in exposing the lies emanating from Washington, D.C., from the Biden administration, from Victoria Nuland and others with respect to the war in Ukraine. Early on, he was very important in exposing the information operation that was being run by U.S. and British intelligence in conjunction with Ukrainian intelligence to, the ghost of Kiev, this fighter pilot that's shooting down all these Russian planes, and then all of these Russian tanks being destroyed, which it turned out were Ukrainian tanks, and they were filming them over and over and over, and identifying CIA operatives that were on the ground, that were there as part of this propaganda campaign. So Gonzalo played an important role in that, and his legacy lives on. As I understand it, the videos are still up at YouTube. So if those who listen to you and watch you on your podcast, if they've never taken time to listen to Gonzalo, I'd encourage them to go back and give him an ear.
Larry, when it comes to the Biden administration, did they do anything to help him in Ukraine?
Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. They easily could have secured his release. They could have told Zelensky, I said, let him go or you're not getting another dime. Or withholding all military aid. You're not going to imprison Americans. Well, Biden only cares about some Americans. And even though Gonzalo was of Chilean heritage, he was an American. He was born in America, born in the USA.
Is that going to have some sort of percussion on the Biden administration?
No, but it's Biden administration is not going to suffer anything from that. You got too many other problems. They're too busy trying to start World War III, and they're losing their ass in Ukraine. So Gonzalo is just a side note. They don't care. And that's one of the reasons Gonzalo's dead. They just didn't care. And efforts to make him care came to naught.
We had Sunak from the United Kingdom went to Ukraine. In your opinion, is the West sending some sort of message to Russia that they are going to support Ukraine to the last Ukrainian?
No, they may be sending that. How are they going to do it? The money that Britain's offering is nothing. On the same day that the United States offered, hey, we don't have any more to send Ukraine. So Ukraine is not going to be getting any more from the United States in the near term. And well, I think with the war that's going to heat up in the Middle East, the United States is going to become increasingly distracted and not able to focus on what's going on in Ukraine, because Ukraine's a lost cause. There's nothing the West can do short of launching nuclear weapons to turn this around. It's just, you reach a point, it's like a ship like the Titanic. Once you got a certain number of compartments flooded, it didn't matter if you got the best pumps in the world. At that point, you reached a tipping point where nothing could be done to save the ship. And that's exactly where Ukraine is now, in terms of manpower, in terms of equipment. And listening to the Brits, I mean, the Brits are a joke. The United Kingdom is an utter joke. They just the other day were advertising on LinkedIn to hire somebody to command their nuclear submarine force because they didn't have anybody in their Navy competent to take the job. I mean, you know, who runs a clown show like that? That's not professional. So, you know, send Rishi Sunak over, you know, maybe he and Zelensky can climb into a hot tub together and soap each other's backs up. I don't know.
Thierry Breton from the European Union, he said that in 2 years, Europe is going to be capable of increasing arm production and catching up with Russia. Is that a dream for them? Is that real?
Yeah, so right now I'm 5'9" and Caucasian. So Nima, in 2 years, I'm going to be 7 feet tall and black and be playing in the NBA. Okay. I'll be the oldest guy in the NBA. Yeah. I've got as much chance of doing that as Europe does of producing weapons. You know, what drugs are these people using? Are they, yeah, I mean, Zelensky must be sharing some of his cocaine with them. I don't know. It's just ridiculous.
Ohio Senator James Vance says Russia produces as much in a day as the US does in a month.
Yeah, yeah.
This is huge. How did he do that?
Well, it's because Russia didn't sell off its industrial plants to foreign countries like the United States did. You know, we've talked about this before on your show when I went back for my high school reunion 50 years ago. 50 years ago, I grew up in the Independence, Missouri, Kansas City area. It's right in the middle of the heartland of the United States. And there were steel factories, there were automobile factories, there were farm implement factories that built harvesters and tractors. Bendix Corporation building parts for aircraft and other things, and Standard Oil. So there were a lot of industrial plants in the Kansas City area 50 years ago. They're gone now. They don't exist. Armco Steel, originally Sheffield Steel, then Armco Steel, gone. That's where my father worked. Standard Oil, where a friend of mine, his dad, that job's gone. The Leeds plants, the two General Motors plants where they build automobiles, gone. Well, Russia kept its plants. Some of them may look crappy from the outside, but inside they're actually in good shape. And so it didn't take a lot for them to ramp up production because Russia recognized that it couldn't be dependent upon, you know, Vietnam or Indonesia or China or anybody in the West for that matter. And so Russia has been in a great position to build, you know, it has a defense industry that's built on serving the national security plan as opposed to being used as a political football and money delivering mechanism to give money to congressmen so they'll turn around and give money back to the defense industry.
We have a lot of activities in Europe. Is there something on behind the scene between the United States and Europe?
Look, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of verbal lip service to, oh, we're going to support Ukraine. And yet there's growing opposition among the civilian population in Europe, in Germany, in Poland. It's already there in Hungary. It's going to increase in Romania. So NATO is, I don't understand their obsession with Russia, because it's not like Russia has been actively subverting them for years. And just the opposite. You can make the case that it's been the West engaged with subversion and interference in Russia's affairs. Everything that Russia did to try to placate and join Europe was pushed away. And it said part of it's racist, because the Europeans think that they're superior to the Slavs, that the Russians are Untermensch. They still believe that in their heart of hearts. Yeah, and it's wrong, and it's going to lead to the end of Europe, actually, in my view.
Putin just recently said West's dependence on Russia is greater than our dependence on them. Can we come to this conclusion that Putin came to?
It's true. Let's stipulate that. The United States has been dependent on you buying a significant quantity of uranium for the nuclear power plants, as well as the nuclear-powered submarines and aircraft carriers. A lot of that comes from Russia. The United States is buying oil from Russia. The Biden administration completely gutted the domestic production in the United States. And so the United States went from being an oil producer now to a net oil importer. But to wake up out of this dream sleep and acknowledge that they've been wrong, and that, the fact of the matter is the United States needs Russia more, simply because Russia produces all of these, significant number of rare earth minerals that are needed for production of electric vehicles. It produces everything from gold, uranium, nickel, aluminum, then nitrogen fertilizer. It's self-sufficient. The United States is not. The United States could be or could approach self-sufficiency if it made it a priority, but they haven't. So here's Russia sitting in the catbird seat. You can impose sanctions on it all day long. It's not going to hurt them. They'll just shrug it off and move on.
The U.S. obsession with China is greater than that of Russia.
Yeah.
And why they're not thinking of having Russia in the middle to have some sort of balance between the West and the East? Why they try to destroy Russia? It doesn't make sense to me.
The United States has become a toxic, malevolent force in the world. Candidly, it needs to have its wings clipped, and clipped severely. Because all we're doing is causing death and mayhem wherever we go. Always in the name of democracy and saving democracy and upholding freedom. It's all lies. Lie after lie after lie. Just go tell that to the people of Libya and Vietnam and Somalia and Serbia and now Ukraine and Russia and Panama. It just, up and down the scale. It is, you at some point, if you're going to be a healthy individual, you've got to recognize that if you've got a serious addiction, that you have to acknowledge your problem and get help. But the United States has a serious addiction. It's addicted to being an imperialist and to wielding its power around the world and expecting other countries to do the same. And Putin, early on, he tried to get along with the West, and he asked to be a part of NATO. Hey guys, let me join. We'll, come be part of you. No, I'm not going to have you in our club. And, Putin said, okay. It wasn't Putin who walked away from the anti-ballistic missile treaty. It wasn't Putin who walked away from the INF treaty. So when it comes to arms control agreements and trying to limit the spread of nuclear weapons, it wasn't Putin that was breaking these agreements. It was the United States. And yet the United States turns around and blames it on Putin. Just, I've gotten to the place I'm just completely fed up with the delusional nonsense that possesses the so-called minds in Washington, D.C. They're going to get us all killed. They are so blind and so consumed with jealousy and anger that has blinded them.
In Bulgaria, they have proposed the demolition of a monument of a Soviet liberation soldier. What's the problem?
Just secular religious fanaticism. That's all. Just like you remember where the West was upset when the Taliban were blowing up these ancient sculptures. But so they go, those are idols. We must destroy idols. There is no God but God. Boom. Well, now you got these guys who they're like religious nuts, but they're secular. In other words, their God is politics. Their God is woke communities. And so they want to destroy any vestige of any cultural heritage that would point to a time when America was in the process of setting itself right or acknowledging those who helped make America great. They were trying to get rid of the statue of William Penn in Philadelphia, which the whole state, Pennsylvania, is named after William Penn. If you're going to destroy him and destroy his statue, well, maybe you should destroy the state. Get rid of it. It doesn't deserve to continue to exist. But they're going to they were, I guess, wanting to do that to the statue, then finally got enough pressure saying no. So we've held the Taliban off for now, but they'll continue. They've already destroyed a number of statues and pieces of art that they just found as politically unpalatable.
It seems that last month, Ukraine and the G7 and several countries of the global south held a secret meeting to promote the so-called Ukrainian peace formula. Was US behind this type of gathering to find some sort of solution for Ukraine?
Yeah, well, I'm sure they had a hand in it, but the key players didn't show up. Russia wasn't there. China wasn't there. So there were some key countries who just said, no, it's not worth our time. We're not going. So I think chances of a negotiated settlement are very slim.
They're not inviting Russia, but they're trying to invite everybody else.
Well, yeah.
To convince them to put some sort of pressure on Russia.
When you were a young man, a teenager, did you ever try to have a party for just a select group of people and make it known that you didn't want someone else invited? That's what they're acting like, a bunch of stupid teenagers. That kind of immaturity and juvenile behavior. We're not going to invite Russia. We're going to isolate it. Look at all of our friends over here. That didn't work. Russia's got very, very strong allies in the global south. And not even Saudi Arabia came away from the meeting and said, man, that was a great meeting. That's Zelensky. He's a wonderful man. Oh, I can't wait to give him more money. No, they weren't saying that at all. I think Zelensky ended up irritating a great number of them. He's just such a grubby, money-hungry little bugger. There are two ways, Nima. No way and no way in hell. Russia will not negotiate on those terms. Russia will set the terms. It's winning the war militarily. It's winning the war economically. It's winning the war in the industrial plant. It's winning the war on the political front. It's not isolated. It's the United States is becoming more isolated. And right now in the UN General Assembly, it's basically the United States, Israel, in these money laundering havens from the Pacific, like Vanuatu, that are voting in favor of Israel. Real countries are going, they're a bunch of murdering thugs. They're worse than Nazis. Yeah, we're not going to be part of that. We're going to speak out against it. So United States is aligning itself with Israel in that way, which makes it more isolated. Nobody wants to, be around you when you've got communicable disease, and they're going to be treating the United States like it's got the measles or COVID.
Is the Biden administration ready to accept that?
It's going to be thrust upon them through this election that's getting underway. Biden's going to be, his popularity is going to be tanking. Beyond, I mean, it has been tanking. It's going down. It's going to continue to go down. And they're going to realize that Trump's numbers are going to get beyond the level of cheating, where he will have much more support that they won't be able to cheat him out of it.
Whoever is against this conflict in Ukraine is going to get more popular in the public opinion of the US. Considering that, do you think Biden would change its policy in Ukraine to have some sort of leverage in the US election? Is that possible? Is that probable?
No. What does he change his policy to? So it's either continue to fund Ukraine, expand funding for Ukraine, freeze funding for Ukraine, or pass a law requiring Ukraine to pay us back what we've already given them. None of those are great options. And all of this is playing out against this backdrop of what's going on with Gaza and Israel. Because I fully expect the International Court of Justice to rule against Israel and rule in favor of the case brought by South Africa, that basically that the Zionists in Israel are a bunch of murdering thugs. They're as bad as Nazis. They talk like Nazis. They act like Nazis. So that'll leave the United States once again being the only one to cast a veto in the UN Security Council, leaving the United States isolated. And when you go around becoming the only one that's stuck on this unpopular cause, after a while, people just start dismissing you and ignoring you. There already have been signs that people are increasingly, because they don't have confidence in the United States, moving into gold. So, the United States is finding itself increasingly isolated. And how does Biden sell that to a domestic electorate? That, hey, look how strong we are. Strong? You can't, as you pointed out earlier, you can't produce in a month what Russia produces in a week in terms of artillery shells. Ditto for drones. Hell, ditto for aircraft, tanks, across the board. So it's really we're starting 2024 off with some, really bad news. I think it's going to get worse.
If Russia intensify and expand this military operation in Ukraine in 2024, as the presidential election is getting more and more serious, how much that would affect the Biden position as a candidate?
And that's going to hurt him. Hurt him in two ways. One, among those who insist that he should have done more, that he should have extended more aid to Ukraine quicker, like the F-16s, TACAM missiles. But I think the war in the Middle East, war with Israel, with the Houthis, and with Iran, that's going to be occupying more of his time and creating more headaches for him. Because again, it's going to put the United States in a position of being isolated and not being able to fulfill its promises to, remember his promise to Ukraine, as long as it takes. As long as it takes. And now it's like, as long as we can. And if, in the 2 weeks I'm going, hey Z, sorry about this, buddy. We can't anymore, man. We are tapped out. Empty pockets. We don't. The warehouses are empty. We're old Mother Hubbard, boy. She's been through the cupboard, and there's nothing there. So sorry, bud. You're on your own. Good luck. Yeah, just ask the Vietnamese how that feels, or the Cambodians. We've done that before. walked away. Well, sort of did it in Iran a little bit.
Denmark was going to send 6 F-16 fighters to Ukraine. This was the first package to be sent to Ukraine, but
Yeah.
it was postponed for some reasons.
Well, you know why? I'll spell it out for you. Pilots. What does that spell? Pilots. They don't have any pilots. Those planes don't fly themselves. I mean, they're one of these days technologically they've already invented drones and jet drones that you can fly, but the F-16s are not in that category. So you actually need a living, breathing person sitting up there in the cockpit in their flight suit that can know how to fly and maneuver that aircraft. They don't have it. They may have been anticipating that they'd get the first tranche of pilots ready to sort of fly them, but the thing they face is the comparable aircraft that the Russians have. I believe it's the Su-34. It can see the F-16 like 100 miles away before the F-16 can see the Russian plane, which means the Russian plane can then shoot down the F-16. If you're a sports guy and you like to go bet money and bet on horse races and soccer matches, and hey, you got to find a bookie that's going to bet on how long the F-16s stay in the air before they're shot down or forced to hide them in a bunker somewhere. It's not a good situation.
When it comes to Trump, do you think that one of the reasons that he was so hated, his attitude toward Russia, he wanted to have some sort of getting along with Russia, with Putin?
Sure.
Do you think that contributed to this hatred against him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, in fact, the decision was made, I believe, in December of 2015 by John Podesta and a guy named Badowski, Brent Badowski, about using Putin as a wedge, as an issue to beat up Trump. So by doing that, they effectively tied Trump's hands, that if Trump tried to do anything that would have had resulted in an agreement with Russia, he would have been attacked for surrendering the United States to Russia, for being a sellout to Putin. So they created an atmosphere where it was impossible for Trump to talk to and deal with the Russians and create and work out a deal that would have avoided war. Biden had no interest in avoiding war. He wanted it. They wanted Russia. The West lusts after Russia. They're going after Russia like a pedophile's going after a 12-year-old girl. It's sick. It's disgusting and it's evil. But that's what's up with the West. There's nothing honorable, noble. They're not in pursuit of democracy or bettering off the welfare of the Russian people. They're about destroying Russia, carving it up so that we can just literally rape it of its natural resources.
Boris Johnson denied everything about that peace talk that were going on in Istanbul.
I wrote about this a month ago or so. The two German authors, one's a former general, they wrote about it in detail, that Lloyd Austin went and met with Zelensky, and then Blinken was sent to talk to Zelensky, and then they sent Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson, he's just a water boy let's call him Biden's bitch. He carries water for the United States wherever the United States wants him to go. And for him to try to argue that something else is a lie, why did this man get tossed as British Prime Minister? Because he lied. He's a proven liar. So he can deny it all he wants. Still doesn't change the truth, the reality. His trips there were documented. And but he wasn't the only one, and it wasn't just his idea. So if he wants to make the narrow argument that I didn't come up with that idea, no, but Washington, D.C. did, and you helped deliver the message.
Zelensky said that if Putin defeats Ukraine, he'll invade Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Moldova, even Uzbekistan. Is there anybody still listening and understanding what he's talking about?
What's clear is he's starting to lose political support in Ukraine. So that's the start. But he still just went around and made the rounds in the Baltic states over the last few days. He's going to that's the story he has to tell in order to try to win Western support or continued Western support. Right now, it's not clear that the U.S. Congress is willing to cough up any money for him. Certainly been no movement on Capitol Hill in that regard.
CNN reported that Ukraine has received from the West anti-aircraft missile system Stinger from 1979 to 1989. Why they're sending these old weapons to Ukraine? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it doesn't, nor should it make sense. It doesn't do anything to change the military picture on the ground. It doesn't do anything to boost Ukrainian capabilities. It's not even going to do anything to help the Ukrainians feel better about, well, at least the Americans cared enough to send their very worst. Like I said, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Ukraine it's a ship that's been damaged beyond repair, that's sinking. Parts of it is still above water, and there's still some trying to bail out water and run the pumps and try to keep it afloat, but it's going to sink. I don't know when. I think it's going to be sooner rather than later, but I've been wrong on dates before. But the overall trajectory of the situation is clear. They're going down.
What would be the destiny of Zelensky?
We don't need another short guy whose major talent is playing the piano with his penis, okay? So the reality is the United States doesn't care about Zelensky. He'll find that out. When he gets thrown away like a used Kleenex or a used piece of toilet paper. He served his purpose, now toss it aside and flush it. That's what's going to happen to him. It's the only question is, will the military kill him in a coup? Or will he survive and escape to some safe haven, Switzerland or Italy, the United States maybe, where they can't touch him? But there's nothing, he's not a wildly popular figure here in the States. People aren't in the streets clamoring for, we got to support and save Zelensky. We love that man. That's not happening.
Larry, I don't know if you saw this piece of Guardian report that neo-Nazis in the US no longer see backing Ukraine as a worthy cause.
Okay. Yeah, maybe, these guys are political to the extreme. That's one of those warning indicators.
Even neo-Nazis are getting political.
Yeah. Even the neo-Nazis say, God, we don't want to be associated with these people. They're clowns.
The Biden administration is not changing its attitude toward Russia.
No, they're going to fight. They're keen on getting into a fight with Russia, and Putin, to his credit, is being very patient trying to avoid it. But there've been reports over the last couple of days they're monitoring increased drone and ISR, which stands for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance activity by U.S. and NATO forces in the Black Sea, and probably prepping for a major attack on a target like the Kerch Bridge or Crimea or both. And if and when that happens, it's going to escalate. Russia's going to be forced to start maybe launching missiles into those bases where these things originated from. If it was the UK or a US base somewhere, we could potentially see that.
Is there any chance of escalation in Ukraine?
Of bringing in the United States and Europe to fight? Not directly, no. But Russia is expanding its operations, it's expanding its personnel, and it's stepping up its intensity. So from that standpoint, Russia's expanding the war, yes. Does Ukraine have the capability to do so? No.
We had this attack on Houthis. Why the United States, together with United Kingdom, decided to do that?
Well, they felt they couldn't sit back and let the Houthis continue to launch missiles at ships without quote, doing something. This thing has been in the works for at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks, planning it. It is not the first time that the United States has been involved with a bombing campaign inside Yemen. I think we did it back in 2015. Didn't work then either. I think we killed a bunch of people at a wedding party. So that becomes problematic. The Houthis, in doing this, the United States has now, I think, incited the Houthis to expand their activities. Previously, the Houthis were only targeting or primarily targeting ships that were owned by Israelis or carrying cargo that was headed to or from Israel. And they were boarding, destroying, taking that cargo. So as a result, you've got a lot of other ships now staying out of the Red Sea, sailing around. Well, now that the United States and the United Kingdom have bombed Yemen, with the Houthis, they're going to view the United States and UK as targets. And that means both going after military targets. Up to this point, they haven't been aggressively targeting the ships, but now they can. They've got ship missiles that could definitely do damage. There's also the likelihood that you'll see terrorist attacks on embassies and diplomatic personnel throughout the region, throughout North Africa, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq. It's going to get ugly.
Erdogan said they're trying to turn the Red Sea into a sea of blood. How are they gonna justify this type of conflicts within NATO?
Well, it's a broader issue. There's a legal issue here. Biden doesn't have authorization to use military force in Yemen. You see, right after 9/11, there was something called the AUMF, authorization for the utilization of military force. And that was designed to go after anybody that was involved with terrorism or supporting terrorism. Well, the Houthis haven't been identified as a terrorist group. They were under Donald Trump. Trump did designate them as a terrorist group. And when Joe Biden came into office, he lifted that designation, said, no, you're not terrorists anymore. So there goes that justification. Members of Congress on the Democrat side are particularly incensed that Biden chose to do this without consulting them. And it's igniting, in my view, a level of anti-U.S. sentiment around the world by going in and bombing the Yemenis. That it's once again the United States killing a bunch of brown people. That feeds into that racist meme. And then on the other thing that's going to happen is the United States is going to run out of missiles at some point here in the next week or two. Because Yemen's got plenty to fire. Everyone they fire, a U.S. destroyer carries like 90. They got these they're long tubes that are packed in the decks of these ships. And they fire a missile, it's called a vertical launching system. Well, once you run out, it's not like you just go load another missile in there. It'd be nice if they had them on board, but they don't. So they have to sail back to a port nearby. Nearest port's Dubai. I think the sailing time from Dubai to the Red Sea there near Sana'a is about 4 or 5 days, maybe longer. So, at some point, those destroyers pull out, which means the aircraft carrier has to go. Because with no destroyers, it will no longer have protection. Same thing with the British ships. British ships, too, they don't have unlimited supplies. And they'll always have to return to their nearest friendly base where they have those missiles stored, stocked, and ready to refit the ships.
It seems that Antony Blinken is trying so hard to convince Saudi Arabia and UAE to be part of this operation in the Red Sea, but he was not successful in that.
Well, a lot of the countries are waking up and saying, hey, we're not going to be, the United States doesn't get to walk us like their favorite poodle. We're no longer going to be this obedient dog. It was reported that Blinken he was in like Turkey and Greece and Oman and Kuwait, and he's in several in Jordan. And so he allegedly told either the heads of government and or foreign ministers what was going to happen. Yeah, we're going to launch these attacks on such and such day. How much you want to bet that at least one person from one of those countries got a hold of the Yemenis and said, hey, United States is going to be bombing you on January 12th or January 11th. So better get ready. The Houthis go, okay, we'll get ready. So they fortified their positions. They moved their missile stocks. They relocate troops. The United States launches this big attack, big billowing clouds of smoke and fire. And just like we saw in Baghdad, in 1991, just as we saw again in Baghdad in March of 2003. The United States puts on a good light show, good fireworks show. It doesn't necessarily change anything on the ground, not a damn thing. And in fact, this may enrage the Yemenis to the point that the Houthi, element within Yemen, to the point that they're going to just actually start attacking U.S. targets outside of that immediate area. It's dangerous, very dangerous, and stupid.
Terry, these Houthis are attacking each and every ship that passes in that region.
Yeah, unless it's Russian or Chinese. If it's Russian or Chinese, they let it pass.
How do they know it's Russian or Chinese?
Well, there's a flag on it. There's a ship name. You can search online for the names of the ship, and they'll give you the databases will pop up who owns those ships. And if it's like the Romanov brothers, well, then they'll let you know that it's probably a Russian-owned ship.
White House said that U.S. has no interest in a war in Yemen. If things get worse in the Red Sea, would that be an option for the U.S. to go on the ground?
It would be incredibly stupid. They don't have the force structure in place with the logistics behind it to put a group of soldiers in, because they would then face a massive attack that would be, I think, potentially overwhelming. And the United States is not in a position to resupply them easily. So, this is just foolish talk. These armchair warriors, we'll go show them. All right. They've been fighting. These Yemenis have been fighting for 9 years. Going on 10 years. So they're not a bunch of slouches. They're not people who are, without skill and capability. They're tough, and they're not afraid.
We had Lloyd Austin thanking United Kingdom for participating in this operation. What was the importance of the United Kingdom being part of this operation?
To have someone else to blame. Yeah. France said, not us. Italians, no. Spain, España, no. Germany, 9. How many different ways you can say no in different European tongues. But let's face it, Britain's a prostitute. Just like a prostitute gets paid for servicing Uncle Sam. That's what's going on here.
Israel is threatening Lebanon with complete destruction. When it comes to this conflict between Hezbollah and Israel, do you think Israel has the capabilities to destroy completely Lebanon?
No. If Israel tries to expand the war beyond its limited scale right now in the north, they'll get crushed. Hezbollah will defeat them. And then the Israelis will be fleeing south towards Jerusalem, trying to see if they can save their army. Hezbollah is the real deal. They've got good military capability. They've been training solidly for, going on 4 or 5 years, perhaps longer. So it's just ridiculous.
Larry, just to wrap up this session, I want to talk about Lloyd Austin. It seems that he was in hospital and Antony Blinken didn't know about that.
Boy, uh, big fat Lloyd Austin is also proved to be pretty dumb. He was never known as a smart guy. I mean, I've got a good friend that served in Afghanistan under him and did not have a kind word to say in his regard. And then when Austin was at CENTCOM, uh, he was attacked, or challenged by analysts from his own command, from the J2 at CENTCOM, as well as from analysts at the Defense Intelligence Agency, that they said Austin was trying to coerce them to lie about what the situation was on the ground in Syria and other places, and they wouldn't do it. So, he's documented as somebody who's been accused of lying about key facts, and now he's not even smart enough to remember that, what, since I'm like in the chain of command to become president, number one, in the event something happens to Biden, something happens to Harris, something happens to the Secretary of State, I believe he's fourth or fifth in line of succession. Might want to tell the White House where I am going to be. And the fact that I'm having a medical procedure that, because it's going to put me under anesthesia, I could potentially die. That happens under anesthesia. Yeah, I should tell somebody. Nah, I'm not telling anybody. Maybe in his defense, he figures since Biden his dementia is so bad that Biden doesn't even know who he is. Biden sits there and looks over because, Biden's a racist. He looks over and says, who's that black boy over there? It's ridiculous.